My husband packed a bag in 9 minutes flat and said his father had just collapsed. I counted 11 seconds before I understood the baby in his arms belonged to my own sister. A branch snapped under my foot, and I ran for my car without looking back even once. A few days later, a woman I'd never met walked through my front door and promised me he was going to pay for every bit of it. I still don't know how long I stood there, holding proof of everything he'd done, before I said one word. Georgia was rinsing yesterday's coffee mug when Martin came down the stairs, already dressed, phone pressed to his ear. "It's my dad," he said, palm over the receiver. "He fell in the driveway. Mom says he's not making sense." She didn't ask questions. She just stood there while he threw clothes into the duffel bag by the door and had it zipped shut before he'd even hung up the phone. On the counter behind her sat the prenatal vitamins she'd started taking 3 months ago, the two of them trying for a baby of their own since spring. He kissed her forehead on his way out and said he'd call every night, and the hallway still smelled like his aftershave long after the door clicked shut. She watched the silver sedan back down the driveway and disappear around the corner, and she told herself 6 days was nothing. By the second night, his texts had shrunk from paragraphs to fragments. Long day. Dad's stable. Mom's a mess. She texted his mother directly, "Is there anything I can send? Anything you need?" And got back nothing. Not a word. Not for 4 days straight. When she finally got him on the phone, the call lasted 40 seconds before the line filled with static, and he blamed the hospital's reception. "I'll call tomorrow," he said, and hung up before she could ask a single question. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone, until the screen went dark on its own. 3 days in, Georgia ran into her friend Catherine by the produce section, a bag of oranges in one hand. "How's Floyd doing?" Catherine asked. "Saw Martin with him at the farmer's market this morning. Looked like he was in good spirits for a man who just took a fall." Georgia's hand went still on the cart handle. "What farmer's market?" "The one on 5th. Martin was right there next to him, practically bragging about the tomatoes." Martin was supposed to be sitting in a hospital 2 hours away. Instead, he'd been 20 minutes from her own front door, picking out produce with a father who wasn't sick enough to stay home. Georgia left the cart in the aisle and drove straight to her car. She didn't call first. She got in the car and drove the 2 hours straight through, replaying the tomatoes the whole way. The main house was dark when she pulled up, but Martin had mentioned once, almost in passing, that he liked to crash in the guest cottage out back whenever his parents' place got too crowded for him. A single lamp was lit behind the curtains. No car in the driveway but Martin's. No sign of Joanne or Floyd at all. Just that one small building, glowing, tucked behind a house that was supposed to be full of sick relatives. She crossed the wet grass and stopped at the gap between them, close enough to see her own breath fog the glass. Martin was standing over a bassinet, both hands lowering a swaddled newborn into it. Careful, practiced, like he'd done it 100 times before. And what she found in that bag would cost him everything. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the ending. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Behind him, close enough to rest a hand flat on his back, stood Georgia's own sister, watching the baby settle with an expression Georgia had never once seen her wear for anyone else's child. A branch cracked under her shoe. Inside, 2 heads turned toward the window at the same time. She didn't wait to find out if they'd seen her. She was already moving, cutting across the wet grass, yanking the car door open before her brain had caught up with her body, the engine turning over before the door had even fully shut. She didn't remember most of the drive home. Somewhere on the highway, her phone lit up on the passenger seat. Thinking of you. Call you in the morning. She read it twice, set the phone face down on the seat, and drove the rest of the way in the dark with both hands locked on the wheel, alone with what she'd just watched through a stranger's window that used to be nobody's business, but now was hers. The house was silent when she got home. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, out of habit, and stood there a moment before she saw them. Her nursery sketches, still spread across the kitchen table, exactly where she'd left them that morning. The crib drawing, right on top. She'd sketched a mobile of little paper cranes over that crib 2 days ago, humming while she did it. She picked up Martin's laptop bag from the hall closet where he'd left it, carried it to the table, set it down next to the sketches, and sat. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. That surprised her more than anything else that night. She unzipped the bag and pulled the laptop out flat onto the wood, right on top of the crib drawing. The laptop woke up on the first key she touched. He'd never bothered locking it, not once in 5 years of marriage. A folder sat right on the desktop, named after the street she'd grown up on, Birchwood Lane. She clicked it open. Photo after photo loaded in a grid. Martin and Maureen outside the cottage, arms around each other, laughing at something off camera. One photo was dated 3 months back. Below the photos sat a PDF. She opened it, and her whole body went still. A birth certificate. Baby's full name, Emily Hopkins. Emily Hopkins was the name she and Martin had picked together, lying in bed one night, for the daughter they hadn't managed to have yet. He'd given it to someone else's baby first. She set the laptop down on the table and sat there a long moment, both hands flat on the wood, staring at nothing. 3 months ago, she'd cried over a negative pregnancy test in this same kitchen. He'd held her that night and told her it would happen when it was supposed to. One more file waited at the bottom of the folder, a draft email, never sent, addressed to a facility 2 towns over. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding my wife's mental health." He'd written 3 paragraphs about erratic behavior, memory lapses, episodes she had never had, building a case for an involuntary hold before she'd done a single thing wrong. The file's timestamp read 3 days ago, 2 full days before he'd ever packed that duffel bag. He'd started planning this before he told her his father had fallen at all. Her phone rang right next to the open laptop. Martin's name lit up the screen. She let it ring twice before she picked up. "Hey," he said, warm, easy, like a man with nothing to hide. "Miss you. Crazy few days here. How's your dad?" "Still shaky. Stable, though. Doctors say a few more days." "Mom sends her love," he added. "Says she misses seeing you." Joanne hadn't answered one single text from her in 4 days. Georgia knew that for a fact. "Maybe when I'm back, we can talk to the doctor again," Martin said, "about the fertility thing. I've been thinking about it a lot out here." She almost laughed out loud into the phone. He wanted to talk about making a baby with her, while another one slept 20 minutes from his childhood home. She didn't tell him about the tomatoes. She didn't tell him about the cottage, or the name on that certificate 3 feet from her own hand. "Get some rest," she said, and hung up before he could say he loved her. For the first time since he'd left, she knew something He didn't know she knew. She photographed every page with her own phone. The folder name, the photos, the birth certificate, the draft email. All of it. Time-stamped. Her hands were steady doing it. Steadier than they'd been at the cottage window 20 minutes earlier. She copied every file onto a flash drive and hid it in her jewelry box, buried under a tangle of necklaces Martin had never once bought her himself. 2 days later, a coworker's offhand mention led her to a number, and the number led a divorce attorney named Kathleen Lancaster straight to her front door. Known around town, the coworker had said, for taking no prisoners. "Tell me what you have," Kathleen said, stepping past her into the front hall without much small talk. Georgia laid it all out on the kitchen table. The folder, the photos, the birth certificate, the draft email. The way she'd rehearsed it in the car. Dates that didn't line up. "Send me everything you've photographed. Tonight, if you can," Kathleen said. Georgia read her the subject line off the draft email. Kathleen went quiet for a beat. "That's not just an affair," she finally said. "That's a plan to have you committed so he can walk away clean and probably keep the house while he's at it. Has he moved any money recently? Opened anything you don't recognize?" Georgia hadn't checked. She promised she would that night. "I want you to hire someone," Kathleen said. "A private investigator. Time-stamped video, admissible in court. Can you sit on this for a week while he builds a real case?" Recording her own husband without his knowledge felt like becoming someone she didn't recognize. Then she thought about the name on that birth certificate and said yes. She opened their joint banking app before bed, the way Kathleen had told her to. A new savings account, opened 6 weeks ago. $2,000 moving into it every payday, like clockwork, right past her. 6 weeks, long before any baby, long before any of this needed money. 6 months ago, she'd asked him about a fertility specialist, the kind with a real success rate, the kind their insurance didn't touch. He'd said they couldn't swing it right now. $2,000 a month said otherwise. She sat with that number until the screen went dark on its own, then wrote it down on the notepad next to the phone. 4 days later, Alan sat across from her at the kitchen table, a heavy-set man in a canvas jacket, gray at the temples, a manila folder between them, thick enough that it wouldn't close all the way. "I don't sugarcoat things," he said, sliding the folder toward her. "You said you wanted everything. Some of this you're not going to like." "I stopped liking any of this 3 weeks ago," Georgia said. "Show me." She opened it. The first photo showed Martin pushing a stroller down a sidewalk she didn't recognize, sunglasses on, grinning at whoever was inside it. Time-stamped 3 days ago, 2 in the afternoon. He'd told her that same day he was sitting at a hospital with his father. Her thumb pressed hard enough into the corner of the photo to leave a crease. Alan turned his tablet around and pressed play. 10 seconds, no sound. Martin and Maureen outside the cottage, her hand flat on his chest, his mouth close to her ear. "There's 4 more like that," Alan said. "Different days, same cottage." "How long have you been watching him?" she asked. 4 days. This isn't new behavior. This is a routine. That line landed harder than any of the photos. "There's one more," Alan said, sliding a receipt across the table. "Pharmacy, 2 days ago. He picked up a prescription for Maureen, told the pharmacist she was his wife." Georgia read the receipt 3 times before the word wife stopped looking like a typo. The last photo was from a diner 2 towns over, Joanne and Floyd in a booth. Floyd holding a bottle to the baby's mouth with the easy confidence of a man who wasn't the least bit new to it. Joanne beaming across the table at both of them. His whole family, all of them, in on it. While she'd been signing his mother's name into sympathy texts, nobody ever bothered to answer. 5 years of holiday dinners at that woman's table. 5 years of calling her mom on birthday cards. Joanne had known the whole time. Georgia set that photo face down on the table, like it might stop being true if she couldn't see it anymore. "One more thing," Alan said. "Your sister's already looking at listings 2 states over. Realtor's name is on 3 of her recent calls." Maureen wasn't just hiding the baby anymore. She was getting ready to leave the state with her. The doorbell rang the next afternoon. A small padded box on the porch. No return address. Her own name in a stranger's handwriting. Inside sat a tiny silver locket from a baby boutique she'd never heard of, and a folded note in Martin's handwriting. "Saw this and thought of our future. Can't wait to be home." She read it twice, standing perfectly still in the doorway. 4 days ago, that sentence would have made her cry from happiness. Now, it just told her exactly which future he meant, and it wasn't the one she'd been trying for since spring. Her phone rang 40 minutes later. Martin, right on schedule. "Did you get it?" he asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I got it." "Dad's turned a corner," he said. "Doctors are happy. I'll finally get out of this house." No mention of a stroller. No mention of a woman with her hand on his chest. No mention of a pharmacy receipt with another woman's name on it as his wife. He'd had 6 days to rehearse a version of his week that never once included his own daughter. She thought about correcting him, just to see his voice change. She didn't. "One more day and I'm home," he said. "I mean it this time. About the doctor, about us. I want to start fresh." She looked at the locket sitting on the table where the laptop used to be. "Can't wait," she said, and meant every word of it, just not the way he thought. After she hung up, she slid the locket and the note into a plastic sleeve and added it to the folder Alan had left behind. Not a gift anymore. Exhibit 1, for a woman who used to think a silver chain meant something good. She texted Kathleen the second the call with Martin ended. "He's back Thursday. Says he wants to start fresh." Kathleen's reply came back within a minute. "Good. Now we start building the ending he doesn't get to write." "One more day," Kathleen wrote. "Practice sounding fragile on the phone tonight. He needs to believe he's already won." Georgia set the phone down and looked at the folder sitting on her counter. The stroller, the cottage, the diner, the pharmacy receipt, the locket, the number written on a notepad. Everything he'd need to believe he'd won, and none of it true. One day, she thought, she could sound fragile for one more day. That night, she sat on the couch in the dark, phone in one hand, the recorder Alan had lent her propped against a book on the coffee table, its little red light steady. She almost put the phone down twice before she dialed. Performing weakness to trap someone felt different than lying to protect herself, even when he'd earned every bit of it. She called Martin and let her voice shake before he even said hello. "I don't think I can do this anymore," she said, tight, holding back tears. "Do what?" Martin asked, and she heard him go still on the other end. "Being alone. All of it. I keep thinking about the baby we don't have, and I don't know what's wrong with me." Hey, don't say that." His voice softened instantly, practiced, like he'd been waiting for this exact opening. "Actually," he said, "Mom mentioned a place, a retreat for women going through a hard time. Real peaceful. She thought it might help you rest for a while." "A retreat? Just a couple weeks. Get your head right before I'm home for good. I already asked them to hold you a spot." He'd already asked, before she had said one word about needing a spot anywhere. "That sounds nice," she said. "Tell me more about it." He did. 6 more minutes of it. The facility's name, the doctor his mother knew there, how easy the paperwork would be if she wasn't up to signing things herself. "And listen," he said, quieter now, like he was doing her a favor. "While you're there resting, it'd probably be smart if I handled the bills, the accounts, just so nothing falls behind." Georgia's stomach turned over. He wasn't only planning to put her away for a while. He was planning to empty out everything around her while she was gone. "That makes sense," she said. "You always were better with the numbers anyway." He laughed, warm and easy, completely unaware he'd just said the truest thing all week. "How long have you been thinking about this?" she asked, keeping her voice small. "Since before I left, if I'm honest," he said. "Figured it'd be easier on both of us if I had a plan ready." He'd had a plan ready before he'd even packed the car. Her own tears surprised her halfway through the call. She'd meant to fake them, and somewhere around the word retreat, they stopped being fake at all. Every word of it went straight onto the recording. She ended the call, thanked him, told him she loved him. The words tasted like metal, and picked up the recorder the second the line went dead. 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Every syllable of it clear. She sat with the recorder in both hands for a long moment, her own breathing the loudest thing in the room, before she trusted herself to stand up. She sent the file to Kathleen before she let herself feel anything about it at all. Kathleen called back in 4 minutes. "That's not just an affair, and it's not just a scheme to keep the house anymore," she said. "That's attempted involuntary commitment, in his own voice, on tape. A judge is going to hate him for this one detail more than almost everything else combined." "What happens Thursday?" Georgia asked. "Thursday, he walks in that door thinking he's got you exactly where he wants you," Kathleen said. "We're going to make sure that's the last thing he ever gets to think." "And the accounts? He wants to take those over the second I'm supposedly gone." "He's not touching a dollar," Kathleen said. "I'm freezing what I can freeze first thing tomorrow morning. Let him find that out on his own." Kathleen laid it out in 4 steps, and Georgia wrote each one down like she was memorizing a part. Get the television queued up. Get Alan's footage loaded. Get the folder within arm's reach. Get Kathleen in the driveway by 6, waiting for a text. She read the list back to herself once, out loud, alone in the kitchen, just to hear that it was real. 5 years of holiday dinners at that woman's table. 5 years of calling her mom on birthday cards. All of it about to end with a checklist on a legal pad. One more day, and then Thursday would come, whether either of them was ready or not. The next morning, a bank alert lit up her phone. A hold placed on 2 joint accounts, pending review. Kathleen had done exactly what she said she would, before Georgia had even finished her coffee. 2 hours away, Martin was about to find out the money wasn't going to be there waiting for him either. Martin called at 11 that same morning, and this time there was no warmth in his voice at all. She'd been waiting for it since the bank alert came through an hour earlier, rehearsing the wounded voice in her head over coffee. My card just got declined at a gas station, he said. Explain that to me. I don't know, Georgia said, keeping her voice thin and wounded. Maybe the bank made a mistake. Banks don't make mistakes on both accounts on the same morning, he said. What did you do? Me? I've barely left the house in a week. Which was almost true. I've done everything the right way for this family, he snapped. You have no idea what I've had to juggle to hold this together. She almost laughed out loud at the word family. Reluctant. Forced out of her. I'll sort the bank out when I'm home tonight, he said. Just try to rest until then, okay? He hung up without saying goodbye, for the first time since he'd left. 20 minutes later, an unfamiliar number lit up her screen. She almost didn't answer. It's Maureen, the voice said, tight and fast. We need to talk before he gets home. Georgia said nothing. She let the silence do the work. He was going to leave you eventually anyway, Maureen said. I didn't make him do anything he didn't already want to do. How long? Georgia asked, tight, holding back tears. Does it matter now? It matters to me. Maureen went quiet for a moment. 1.5 years, she finally said. Since before my own engagement even ended. Mom's known since the beginning. Every unanswered text, every clipped phone call, every dinner at that woman's table, all of it made a different kind of sense now. The guest cottage wasn't a coincidence either. Joanne had built her own son a hideout in her own backyard and called it hospitality. You threw me a shower after I lost the last pregnancy, Georgia said. You brought a cake. Maureen didn't have an answer for that. The line stayed quiet for 6 full seconds before she hung up. At 2 that afternoon, Alan sent a video file with no explanation attached. She opened it standing at the counter. 10 seconds of grainy footage. Martin and Maureen on the cottage porch, his hands raised, her arms crossed. Both of them clearly shouting, though the audio was thin and far away. Alan's text followed a minute later. Neighbor's doorbell camera. Money trouble, looks like. Thought you'd want to see it. For the first time since any of this had started, it wasn't only her world coming apart. Kathleen arrived at 4, letting herself in through the side door the way they'd agreed, and set a slim black folder of her own on the kitchen table next to Georgia's. Once he's inside and that door's shut, you don't stop for anything, Kathleen said. Not if he cries, not if he swears none of it's true, even with his own voice playing in the room. I know. Do you? Kathleen studied her for a second. 5 years is a long time to unlearn in one evening. Georgia thought about the birth certificate, the pharmacy receipt, the word wife. I'm ready, she said. And for the first time all week, she believed herself. By 4 o'clock, she had everything laid out on the coffee table. The folder, the flash drive, the recorder, Alan's photographs, face up, in the order she wanted Martin to see them. She cued the video files onto the television and tested the volume twice. Kathleen texted at 5:30. In position 2 blocks over. Text me the second he's inside. Georgia put on the gray dress she'd bought for their anniversary 2 years back. The one he'd once said made her look like someone he was lucky to know. She looked at herself in the hallway mirror for a long moment, then went to sit in the dark living room and wait. Alan texted at 5, parked half a block down, eyes on the street. She read every message twice, the way she'd been reading everything twice for 2 weeks now. The house was so quiet, she could hear the refrigerator cycle on in the kitchen, and then the clock on the mantel ticking through 6 o'clock, then past it. At 6:10, headlights swept across the curtains, and a car door closed in the driveway outside. Georgia didn't move from the sofa. She let him find her sitting in the dark, the remote resting in her lap, and waited for the sound of his key in the lock. The door opened. Martin stepped inside, already talking. Something about traffic, about needing a shower before anything else, about being glad to finally be home. And stopped mid-sentence when he saw her sitting in the dark. "Georgia? Why are the lights off? You okay?" He set his bag down by the door, the same spot it always went, like nothing about tonight was different from any other night he'd walked through that door. She picked up the remote and pressed play. The screen filled with grainy nighttime footage, him lowering a swaddled newborn into a bassinet while Maureen watched. He froze completely. "That's not... Where did you even..." "Keep watching," Georgia said. The footage kept running. The stroller on the sidewalk, the diner booth, the pharmacy receipt blown up large enough to read the word wife. His face went through 4 different colors in under a minute. "I can explain." "Explain the birth certificate," Georgia said, and set the printed page down on the coffee table between them. Emily Hopkins. That was our name. He had nothing to say to that. Not for a long moment. "It just happened," he finally said. "Maureen and I... It wasn't planned. None of it was supposed to go this far. You planned an involuntary hold for me before you left this house," Georgia said. "That part was very much planned." "I would have taken care of you," he said, like that was a defense. "You already were," she said. $2,000 a month. Taking care of yourself." Then she pressed play on the recorder, and his own voice filled the room, warm, reasonable, describing a facility, a doctor, paperwork she wouldn't be up to signing herself. "You were going to have me committed," she said. "While you moved money I wasn't even supposed to know existed. That's not... I would never actually..." "Say that to the recording," she said. "It already disagrees with you." He stood up fast enough to knock the coffee table, his hands closing into fists at his sides, going nowhere, landing on nothing. "This is insane," he said. "You've been spying on me for weeks." "You spent 5 years lying to me for free," Georgia said. "I only started charging you for it in week 2. So what? You hired someone to follow me around like a criminal?" "I hired someone to do what you should have done and didn't. Tell the truth." He looked at the folder, the photographs, the recorder, the birth certificate, all of it laid out like a verdict already reached. And something in his face finally understood there was no talking his way out of a room this well prepared. He opened his mouth to say something else, something worse, and that was exactly when the doorbell rang. Neither of them moved for a second. Then Georgia stood, smoothed the gray dress with both hands, and went to answer it herself. Kathleen didn't wait to be asked in. She walked straight past him with a folder twice the size of Alan's. She said his name once, flat, and set the papers down on the table next to everything else. "Restraining order, effective as of 5 o'clock today," she said. "And this, a thicker stack, is the civil suit. You, your sister, and your parents, named as co-conspirators." "The house is in both our names," he said. "You can't just..." "Actually, I can," Kathleen said. "Fraud and attempted involuntary commitment tend to move a judge quite a bit in a wife's favor. You'll want a lawyer of your own by morning." He looked at Georgia one more time, like he expected her to stop it, to soften, the way she always had before. She didn't move. "Get your things and go," she said. "Kathleen will walk you out." He left with one bag, the same duffel he'd packed in 9 minutes flat, weeks ago, and didn't look back once. The porch light caught the sedan's silver paint as he pulled out of the driveway for the last time, the same way it had the morning he left for a father who was never actually sick. Kathleen stayed in the doorway until the taillights turned the corner, then closed the door and looked at Georgia. "How do you feel?" she asked. Georgia looked around the living room, the folder, the recorder, the birth certificate still sitting on the coffee table where she'd left it, and realized she didn't have an answer yet. "Ask me tomorrow," she said. 4 days later, Martin showed up at the door anyway, unshaven, asking for 5 minutes. "The restraining order says 200 feet, Georgia said, phone already in her hand. "You're standing on my porch. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. Please." "You had 5 years. Georgia, I still love you. Whatever happened with Maureen, that never stopped being true." "It doesn't matter anymore what's true," she said. "It only matters what's over." "So that's it? 20 years from now, you're just going to tell people I was a bad husband?" "No," she said. "I'm going to tell them I married a man who planned my breakdown before he ever packed a bag. And I'm going to have the recording to prove it." He didn't move right away. Then a car engine turned over across the street. A process server Kathleen had waiting, exactly like she said she would. And he was gone before Georgia had to say another word. Kathleen called that evening with the rest of it. The house was hers outright, awarded in the temporary order. Martin's parents had hired their own lawyer, separate from his, which Kathleen said was never a good sign for the person doing the hiring. "And Maureen?" Georgia asked. "Filed for full custody of the baby this morning. On her own. Didn't put his name on the petition anywhere." Whatever they'd built together in that cottage, it hadn't survived contact with a lawyer either. "One more thing," Kathleen said. "Joanne called my office today. Wanted to know if there was any way to keep this quiet for the family's sake." "What did you tell her?" "That the family should have thought of that before they spent a year and a half helping hide this from you." Georgia hung up and sat with the quiet for a minute. A year and a half. She'd have said it felt like 10 years, except that would have made it someone else's story instead of hers. 3 weeks later, they were back in a courthouse hallway for the hearing that made everything temporary into something permanent. Martin sat 2 rows back with a lawyer he was clearly still paying out of an account that used to be half hers. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked smaller, in a suit that fit him worse than it used to. Joanne sat beside him, not meeting anyone's eyes, not even her son's. Maureen wasn't there at all. Her own lawyer had asked for a separate date, which Kathleen said was exactly what a person did when they'd stopped being on anyone's side but their own. When the judge read the order out loud, the house, the restraining order made permanent, the civil suit moving forward, Georgia didn't feel the triumph she'd expected. She felt done. Kathleen touched her elbow on the way out. "That's the last time you'll ever have to sit in a room with him, if you don't want to." Martin didn't get up to follow them out. That weekend, she cleared the kitchen table for the first time in a month and pulled out the old folder, the crib sketch, the little paper cranes, all of it. She looked at them for a long time. She'd drawn that crib the same week she started the prenatal vitamins, humming while she did it, certain the hardest part was already behind her. It hadn't been. Not even close. But she wasn't the same woman who'd drawn it, either. She didn't throw the sketches out. She slid them into the back of the folder, gently, the way you'd put away something that mattered once and still deserved to be kept. Then she turned to a fresh page. Not a crib this time. A floor plan. Shelves, a drafting table by the window, a small studio space, just her size. She'd been a graphic designer for a company that used her work and never once used her name. That was going to change too, starting on this exact page. She wrote a single line across the top, a name for something that belonged only to her. The afternoon light moved slowly across the table while she worked, the way it always had in that kitchen, on every ordinary day before any of this started. She thought about the morning he'd packed that duffel bag in 9 minutes flat and said his father had just collapsed. 9 minutes to invent a lie. 5 years to build one. 1 gray dress, 1 television, and 1 evening to end it. She picked up her pencil and kept drawing. And for the first time since any of this started, she wasn't waiting for a single thing to happen to her. Stories like this one tend to leave a few quiet truths behind. That the smallest inconsistency, a name on a receipt, a story that doesn't match a timeline, is usually the first thread worth pulling. That evidence gathered calmly always outlasts an accusation shouted in anger. And that walking away with your name intact matters more than winning the argument in the moment. Have you ever caught someone in a lie so small it seemed almost forgivable, only to find out how far it actually went?